First Americans. More than 15,000 years ago, humans crossed a frozen bridge of ice and land between Siberia and Alaska. They followed mammoths and bison, hunted with stone-tipped spears, and built fires under endless northern skies. Over centuries, they spread across the continent. Through mountains, plains, and deserts, they learned the rhythm of the land, when to plant, when to hunt, when to move. They grew maize, beans, and squash, the three sisters that fed civilizations. They carved homes into cliffs, built cities from earth, and raised monuments that still stand in silence. In the Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans created vast stone dwellings on canyon walls. Along the Mississippi, the city of Cahokia rose, a metropolis of temples and wooden palisades, larger than London at the time. In the forests of the Northeast, the Iroquois built longhouses and powerful alliances that would influence future democracies. Across the Great Plains, buffalo herds shaped entire cultures. From the frozen Arctic to the tropical Gulf, hundreds of nations thrived, trading, storytelling, and worshiping the spirits of the earth. By the time European sails appeared on the horizon, the land was already full of voices, memories, and gods. Age of colonies. In 1492, explorers from Europe crossed the Atlantic and never left. The Spanish arrived first, planting their crosses in Florida and the Southwest. They built missions from Texas to California, teaching their language, faith, and rule. The French moved down the Mississippi and named it Louisiana. The English came later, building colonies along the Atlantic coast. Jamestown in 1607, the first lasting English settlement. Plymouth in 1620, founded by people seeking freedom yet denying it to others. Life in the colonies was brutal. Hunger, disease, and wars with native nations took countless lives, but the colonies endured. Tobacco made fortunes in Virginia. Cotton and sugar built the South on the backs of enslaved Africans. By 1700, 13 colonies stretched from Maine to Georgia. They were English in name, but something new in spirit. Markets boomed, ports grew crowded, and the idea of America began to take root. Loyalty to the crown was fading. The people were restless, and rebellion was coming. American Revolution. It began with taxes, the Stamp Act, the Tea Act. The furious cry, "No taxation without representation." Protests filled the streets. In 1770, British soldiers fired into a crowd in Boston. 5 dead, but a nation awakened. In 1773, rebels dumped tea into the harbor under the moonlight, daring an empire to respond. Britain answered with troops. By 1775, shots echoed at Lexington and Concord. The revolution had begun. George Washington took command of a ragtag army, farmers, blacksmiths, and dreamers fighting for a new world. They endured brutal winters, starvation, and defeat, yet refused to surrender. In 1776, they declared independence. All men are created equal. The words were not true yet, but they changed everything. France joined their side. At Valley Forge, soldiers froze and starved, but hope burned on. In 1781, at Yorktown, British troops surrendered. 2 years later, the Treaty of Paris made it official. The United States was born. A free nation, untested, uncertain, and already divided over what freedom truly meant. Building a nation. 13 states. One experiment. The young country struggled to govern itself under the weak Articles of Confederation. So in 1787, leaders met in Philadelphia. 55 men in a hot summer room, arguing about power, liberty, and control. They wrote a new constitution. It created Congress, the courts, and a president. George Washington took the oath in 1789, defining what leadership would mean in this new republic. The Bill of Rights promised freedom of speech, religion, and the press. But for millions, freedom was only a word. Enslaved Africans built the economy. Native Americans were pushed from their homes. Still, the nation grew fast. Canals carved through wilderness, steamboats filled the rivers, and factories began to rise. By 1800, 4 million people called themselves Americans, half under 16, all chasing opportunity. Democracy was taking shape, imperfect and exclusive, but alive. It was a country learning, stumbling, and building itself one law, one voice, and one dream at a time. Westward expansion. In 1803, President Jefferson bought the Louisiana Territory from France and doubled the nation overnight. Lewis and Clark set out to map it, crossing mountains, rivers, and endless plains. They met dozens of tribes who had called the land home for centuries. Soon, settlers followed, in wagons, on horseback, on foot. They cleared forests, built farms, and founded towns. The frontier moved westward like a wave that never stopped, but that wave swept people away. In the 1830s, the government forced native nations to move beyond the Mississippi. The Trail of Tears killed thousands, men, women, children. In 1845, Texas joined the Union. War with Mexico followed. By 1848, America had taken California, Arizona, and New Mexico. Then came gold. Sutter's Mill, 1849. Hundreds of thousands rushed west, chasing dreams of fortune. Most found only dust and heartbreak. By 1860, the United States stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. But beneath its growth was a sickness, a nation divided by slavery, greed, and power. And soon, that sickness would turn to war. Civil War and Reconstruction. In 1861, 11 Southern states left the Union. They formed the Confederate States of America, believing slavery was their right and destiny. The North fought to preserve the Union. The South fought to preserve a way of life built on chains. Antietam, Gettysburg, Shiloh, battlefields soaked in blood. Over 600,000 dead, brothers killing brothers. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Freedom had a voice, but it came at a terrible cost. 2 years later, the war ended. The Union was saved, slavery abolished. Days later, Lincoln was shot. The price of victory paid in silence. Reconstruction began with hope and ended in betrayal. Laws promised equality, but terror replaced justice. By 1877, federal troops withdrew, and segregation took root. Still, Black Americans endured. Many moved north, to Chicago, Detroit, New York, seeking freedom in factories instead of fields. Their migration reshaped America's cities, music, and culture. The war ended, but its wounds never truly healed. Age of Industry. After 1870, America roared to life again. Steel, oil, and railroads tied the nation together. Cities grew upward, steel towers scraping the sky. Immigrants poured in from Europe and Asia, millions chasing opportunity. They worked long hours in mines, factories, and sweatshops. Children labored, tycoons prospered. The gap between rich and poor widened. President Theodore Roosevelt fought the monopolies, broke up trusts, and created national parks. He reshaped the idea of government, that it could protect the people, not just the powerful. In 1898, war with Spain turned the U.S. into an empire. It took the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam, the first steps toward global reach. In 1917, America entered World War I, tipping the balance toward victory. When soldiers returned, the 1920s exploded with energy, jazz, radio, and roaring cities. Then, in 1929, the Great Depression struck. Banks failed, crops withered, hope vanished. Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal built bridges, roads, and jobs, rebuilding not just the economy, but faith itself. For the first time, Americans looked to Washington not as a distant power, but as a lifeline. The country had changed, tougher, wiser, and ready for a new century. World Wars and Modern America. In 1939, war consumed the world again. After Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, America entered the fight. Factories turned into arsenals. Women filled the assembly lines. By 1945, Germany surrendered, and atomic bombs ended the war with Japan. The United States emerged as a superpower, strong, confident, and afraid of what came next. The Cold War began, a global struggle for power and ideology. Korea, Vietnam, Cuba, Berlin. Wars fought in shadows, guided by fear of the bomb. At home, a different war raged, one for equality. The civil rights movement marched, sang, and suffered. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed of justice and paid with his life. In 1969, humanity reached the moon. In 1973, Roe v. Wade legalized abortion, a victory that would divide the nation for generations. The 1970s brought Watergate, inflation, and disillusionment. Then came the 1980s. Ronald Reagan reshaped politics with his vision of smaller government and free markets. His era brought pride, wealth, and growing inequality. By 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed and the Cold War ended. America stood alone as a superpower. But peace did not mean calm. In 2001, terrorists struck New York and Washington. The Twin Towers fell. The war on terror began, in Afghanistan, then Iraq. In 2008, a financial collapse shook the world, and Barack Obama became the first Black president. The digital age arrived. Smartphones, social media, endless information. Connection grew, but so did division. In 2020, a global pandemic froze the world. Cities went silent, hospitals overflowed, and millions grieved. Today, America faces new struggles over truth, freedom, and the planet itself. From the first footprints in Alaskan snow to satellites orbiting above, the story of America is not finished. It keeps rewriting itself, one generation, one dream, one fight at a time.